I was halfway down the hallway when I heard my name, and something in the tone stopped me cold. Nina's sweet, but you know Lila has always had more drive. I froze outside the kitchen door, the summer air from the back patio, drifting in with the smell of barbecue and fresh cut grass. Inside, my mother's voice carried like silk-wrapped steel. You need someone who will challenge you, Daniel. Someone with ambition. Not someone who spends her days painting sunsets and chasing feelings. I could barely breathe. My boyfriend, Daniel, was in that room. The same Daniel I'd dated for 3 years. The one I thought I'd marry. He'd gone to grab us drinks from the kitchen during my sister's graduation party, and I'd followed a minute later, wondering what was taking so long. Now I wished I hadn't. She's always been a dreamer, Margaret, Daniel said, his voice low. But I love her. Do you? There was a pause. I pressed my back to the wall, willing the conversation to end. Instead, it twisted deeper. Love is important, my mother said gently, but it isn't everything. You want a future, don't you? Something solid? Lila just made junior partner at one of the most prestigious firms in Charlotte. Nina still lives in a studio filled with unfinished canvases. Think long term. I couldn't see them, but I could picture her placing a hand on his arm the way she always did. Warm, motherly, persuasive. She's not going to be able to build with you, Daniel, my mother continued. Not like Lila can. And be honest, haven't you felt that too? The silence was louder than anything else. When Daniel finally spoke, it wasn't a protest. It was a sigh, a thoughtful one. Maybe. I just didn't want to admit it. That's when I left, quietly, without a word. I walked back through the garden, past my cousins laughing by the pool, past the twinkle lights my father had strung up in the trees. I smiled when people waved, hugged Lila when she approached me with a glow of achievement on her perfect face. I stayed until the party ended, but something inside me had already broken. Over the next few weeks, the cracks spread fast. Daniel started talking about Lila in little ways, how confident she was during her graduation speech, how cool it was that she'd already landed clients. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting. But then came the canceled dates, the vague texts, the nights he said he was too tired to talk but was tagged in someone's Instagram story at a downtown wine bar. I confronted him once. He said they ran into each other downtown. Had lunch. She's your sister, Nina. It'd be weird if we didn't get along. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But I knew. The next dinner at my parents' house, I watched them across the table. Lila's hand brushing his wrist when she laughed. His eyes drifting to her when he thought no one was looking. My own mother, smiling like she'd already set a wedding date. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a theft of my relationship, my future, and worst of all, the belief that family would never do this. You're being dramatic, Jessie said, my best friend since high school, after another dinner ended with Daniel leaving early and Lila offering to give him a ride. No, I whispered. I think I'm being replaced. Jessie didn't laugh. She just looked at me for a long time, then said, You deserve someone who doesn't need convincing to love you. I should have left. Should have packed my things and walked away before the final blow. But I stayed, maybe out of fear, maybe because I still hoped I was wrong. That hope shattered 3 months later. It was a Tuesday. I'd bought 2 tickets to a band Daniel loved, one of those indie folk groups he always said he wanted to see live. I decided to surprise him. I still had a key. We'd been talking about moving in together before everything. His apartment was quiet. I called out, got no answer. Then I saw the trail, his jacket, her heels, a silk scarf I recognized from Lila's Instagram. The bedroom door wasn't fully shut. I heard her laugh first, and then the unmistakable creak of the mattress. The soft, low sound of his voice. I don't remember opening the door. I just remember the way Lila's hair looked spilling across his chest, the way their bodies tensed when I dropped the envelope of tickets onto the hardwood floor. They scattered like confetti. Nina, Daniel started, grabbing for a shirt. Lila didn't flinch. She just pulled the covers over her chest and rolled her eyes. Well, this is awkward. Don't, I said. Don't lie. Don't explain. Just don't. He stood there, mouth open, guilt already turning to excuses. I'm sorry, he said finally. It didn't mean to happen like this. How long? There was a pause. 2 months. Officially. Since Mom talked to you? I asked. The way they looked at each other confirmed everything. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just walked out and drove home. The tears came later, but not as loud sobs. They came in waves of silence, of not recognizing myself in the mirror, of standing in my studio, looking at unfinished paintings and wondering if anything I built had ever been real. The next day, I went to my mother's house. She was arranging flowers. Don't be so dramatic, Nina, she said, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. Relationships end. You'll find someone who suits you better. You did this. She glanced up. I did what needed to be done. Lila deserves a partner who can match her ambition. And I don't. You're softer, a dreamer. You'll find someone who fits that. I nodded. Then I left. I packed everything I could fit into my hatchback, my art supplies, my portfolio, a duffel bag of clothes, and a folder labeled Chicago. I left a note on the kitchen table. For my mother, for Lila, for Daniel. 3 words, nothing more. Watch me thrive. It was still dark when I crossed the North Carolina border, the mountains shrinking behind me as I headed west toward a city where no one knew my name. Denver wasn't some grand, strategic choice. It was where my art school roommate had once moved to chase her own version of reinvention. She'd said it was the kind of city where people came to begin again. That was all I needed to hear. The motel room I checked into smelled faintly of bleach and something older. Cigarettes, maybe. The walls were thin. The air conditioning rattled. But it was mine. For the first time in months, no one knew where I was. And that anonymity was strangely comforting. I gave myself 5 minutes. 5 minutes to sit on the edge of the bed, face in hands, letting it all fall apart. 5 minutes to cry, to rage, to feel like a fool for trusting people who had never really seen me. Then I opened my laptop. The job hunt was brutal. Most places didn't want someone with a fine arts degree and no corporate experience. I went on interviews for barista jobs, gallery assistants, anything. My savings, never large to begin with, dwindled fast. I found a studio apartment in a building that hadn't been updated since the 70s, the kind where the elevator creaked like a haunted house and the radiator hissed in its sleep. But it had 4 walls, and a lock, and a window that looked out over a used bookstore and a noodle shop. That was enough. I made a rule. Apply to at least 5 jobs a day, no matter how exhausted I felt. I hung a whiteboard in the kitchen and wrote it out in marker. You are not broken. You are becoming. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Meridian Capital Group. The woman on the phone said the admin assistant position had been filled, but they had another opening. An executive assistant to one of their junior investment associates. She said he needed someone organized, quick on their feet, and able to deal with a little chaos. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. That's how I met Julian Hart. He didn't look like the finance guys I'd imagined. No slick back hair or expensive cufflinks. Just a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, a face in need of sleep, and a desk buried under reports and takeout boxes. When I walked in, he looked up and blinked like he hadn't seen daylight in days. Sorry about the mess, he said, gesturing to a chair. I'm Julian. Nina Callahan, I replied, smoothing down the thrift store blouse I'd ironed 3 times that morning. I'm told you need an assistant who knows how to navigate controlled disasters. A smile ghosted across his face. That's accurate. The interview was short. He barely glanced at my resume before asking, why an art major? Why apply here? I could have lied, said I was looking for stability, or that I'd always been fascinated by markets. But something in his exhaustion made me honest. Because I had to leave everything behind, I said quietly. And I'm starting over. I need a job. I learn fast. I work harder than most people. I don't quit. He studied me for a moment, like he was seeing something under the surface. I get that, he said finally. I've started over too. He offered me the job that afternoon. My first week was a blur of color-coded calendars, last-minute coffee runs, and trying to decode Julian's scribbled notes on Post-its. He was smart, brilliant even, but completely disorganized. I built him a system in a week. He remembered to eat lunch. He stopped losing client notes. He started saying thank you. Late one evening, I found myself still at the office, sorting through investor files by risk category. Julian looked up from his laptop and blinked. Why are you still here? I glanced at the clock. 11:02 p.m. Because the work isn't done, I said simply. He didn't argue. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. We started having lunch together, not out of obligation, but because we genuinely enjoyed the break. He told me about his father, a contractor who disapproved of his money games, and about growing up in a household where ambition was survival. I told him little bits about Asheville, about painting, about losing things you thought were forever. You're a mystery, he said one afternoon over banh mi sandwiches. Most people talk endlessly about themselves. You deflect. Maybe I'm just boring. He shook his head, not even a little. We didn't flirt. Not really. But there was something unspoken, a respect, a curiosity, a quiet pulse building between the hours and coffee runs and the shared silence of two people who had both been broken once and were now learning how to build again. One night, as I was locking up his office, he handed me a folder. What's this? A business plan, he said. Something I've been working on for years. I want to start something of my own, something real. I think you should be part of it. I blinked. Julian, I'm just your assistant. No, he said, voice low but certain. You're the person who makes things work. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Starting a business sounded glamorous on paper. In reality, it was building IKEA desks at midnight in a one-bedroom apartment, calculating burn rates with grocery store receipts, and answering emails from the couch because the dining table was now conference central. But we did it anyway. We called it Hart and Callahan Capital, a boutique investment firm focused on sustainability, equity, and small businesses often ignored by traditional firms. We had no office, no interns, no fancy glass walls. Just a mission, 2 laptops, and enough shared determination to light up the Rockies. I remember the night we filed our LLC paperwork. Julian looked at the confirmation email, then at me and said, Guess we're really doing this. We are, I whispered, and we're either brilliant or completely out of our minds. He grinned. Let's find out. The days were long. The nights were longer. I split my time between organizing investor decks, teaching myself accounting basics, and temping at an art gallery uptown to help cover rent. Julian worked 16-hour days developing pitch strategies, attending local networking events, and cold calling potential clients. He had a gift with words. I had a gift for order. Together, we kept each other standing. We didn't talk about what was happening between us. Not directly, but something shifted the night the power went out during a snowstorm. We were both still up working, surrounded by notes and Chinese takeout. I went to the window to light a candle. He followed, stopping beside me in the half-dark, the city below glowing under a thick blanket of white. He didn't say anything. He just kissed me. Soft, intentional, certain. When he pulled back, he didn't apologize. He just whispered, I've wanted to do that for a long time. We didn't define anything. Not right away. But after that night, it became normal to wake up tangled together on the couch, to pour coffee into mismatched mugs while reviewing investor proposals, to share quiet moments in between chaos that felt more like home than anything I'd known. 6 months later, Julian proposed. No ring, no orchestra, Just us sitting on my living room floor in sweatpants, surrounded by sticky notes and budget projections. "Marry me," he said, looking up from a spreadsheet. "Be my partner in everything." I blinked. "People will say it's too soon." "Let them." I said yes. Our wedding was simple. Just us. A courthouse, my best friend Jesse, who flew in from Philadelphia with a box of tissues, and Julian's brother Marcus. I wore a cream midi dress I found secondhand. Julian wore a charcoal suit with a coffee stain on the cuff he hadn't noticed until after we said our vows. We had dinner at the Vietnamese restaurant where we used to grab lunch during our Meridian days. Mrs. Nguyen, the owner, brought out champagne saved for special people and made us take a picture under the lanterns. That night, we didn't dance or toast with 100 guests. We just held each other on the tiny couch in our apartment, surrounded by half-assembled shelving units and a giant whiteboard that read, "Clients Week 1 Goals." Julian brushed my hair back and said, "This is the beginning, isn't it?" It is. Our beginning wasn't perfect. It was chaotic, messy, underfunded, and exhausting. But it was ours. It was built from the ground up, not handed to us, not stolen from someone else, not built to impress anyone but ourselves. The next 6 months tested every part of our relationship. We fought over money, over timing, over whether to expand too quickly or wait. Julian wanted to reinvest everything back into the business. I wanted to keep enough in reserve to survive slow months. We slammed doors. We went silent for 2 days. But in the end, we always returned to the table, tired, humbled, and ready to compromise. "I'm not afraid of risk," I told him one night, "but I'm also not afraid to protect what we've built." And he listened. That was the difference. He listened. Our first big break came from a small clean energy company in Boulder. They were looking for investors who didn't just see them as a quick return. Julian worked on the pitch for 3 weeks. I designed the decks, formatted the reports, even created mock-ups of their long-term impact using data visualizations I'd learned on YouTube at 2 a.m. They said yes. Then they told 3 of their partners. Momentum arrived like a rising tide. We didn't celebrate with champagne. We celebrated with spring rolls and cheap wine in coffee mugs. "To our first real client," Julian toasted. "To surviving the worst nights," I added. "To my brilliant wife," he said, raising his cup, "who never stopped believing in this, even when I almost did." That night, I realized something had shifted again. We weren't just surviving. We were building. A life. A business. A love that grew in between the cracks left by what others had broken. And for the first time since leaving Asheville, I didn't feel like I was running anymore. I felt like I was home. 3 years passed. Our company outgrew the apartment first, then the co-working space, then the tiny office above the bakery with the leaky pipes. By the time we signed the lease on our downtown space, a sleek, light-filled suite with glass walls and an actual reception desk, we had 10 full-time employees, a client roster stretching across 3 states, and a reputation for doing things differently. Julian handled vision and outreach. I handled everything else: systems, hiring, operations, risk management. Together, we built something that felt solid, respected, real. People started noticing. So did the industry. One crisp fall morning, as I was reviewing Q3 numbers, Julian slid a folded financial magazine across the breakfast table. "You might want to see this." I glanced down at the small headline in the corner. "Davis and Associates faces bankruptcy after failed expansion." The name hit me like a brick to the chest. I hadn't thought of them in months, maybe longer. But there it was. Davis. Lila's law firm. The same firm she had built with Daniel after he left his previous firm to join her post-graduation. After he left me, I tried to keep my voice even. "I didn't know you followed legal news out of Asheville." "I don't," Julian said, tone careful. "But their firm handles compliance for Meridian Group." That got my attention. Meridian's on our shortlist for sustainable portfolio acquisition, he continued. We've been vetting them for 2 quarters. I stared at the page. It didn't feel real. A lifetime ago, I'd walked out of Daniel's apartment and left everything behind. Now his company's collapse might bring him straight back into mine, through the front doors of the business I'd built from scratch. Julian watched me closely. I wanted you to hear it from me before the office starts buzzing. They're connected to Meridian? Daniel is Meridian's compliance officer. Lila's firm is their primary legal contractor. Or was. The irony burned, but it didn't sting. Not anymore. Does it change the acquisition plans? I asked. That depends on you. I blinked. You'd walk away from the deal just for me? If you needed me to, he said simply. And that, more than anything, reminded me why I'd said yes to him. Why I'd trusted him when I didn't trust anyone else. Don't be ridiculous, I said, quietly reaching for his hand. It's just business. The deal moved forward. 2 weeks later, it was official. Hart and Callahan Capital would acquire Meridian's sustainable energy portfolio and integrate it under our firm. Meridian would maintain its brand, but operate under our leadership structure. Daniel would remain in his role, now reporting indirectly to one of our regional directors. Technically, he worked for me, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. Let's host a gala, Julian suggested one evening as we reviewed the quarterly report. I raised an eyebrow. We don't usually celebrate acquisitions. This one feels personal, he said with a knowing look. Plus, it's a great excuse to showcase our impact to new investors, and to formally welcome the Meridian team into the fold. I hesitated. Julian leaned forward. Invite them, Nina. All of them. Lila. Daniel. Your mother, if you want. My chest tightened. You think that's a good idea? I think it's time they saw what you've built. Not for revenge. For recognition. I sat in silence, the weight of the past creeping up behind my shoulders. I don't want them to think I'm flaunting success. They won't, Julian said gently. They'll see a woman who left, rebuilt, and became more than they ever imagined. That night, I pulled out my laptop. The gala would be hosted at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, our favorite venue, sustainable, elegant, full of quiet wonder. I reviewed guest lists, vendor quotes, floral options, all while drafting 3 invitations I never expected to write. Lila Callahan, Daniel Brooks, Margaret Callahan, each with a note attached hand-signed, looking forward to showing you the life I've built. Nina Callahan Hart, I didn't know what I was chasing, not exactly. Closure? Maybe. Peace? Possibly. I only knew I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't the girl outside the kitchen door, heart breaking over words never meant for her ears. I was a woman with a voice, and it was time to let them hear it. The gala night arrived like the quiet before a storm, too calm, too perfect. The museum had never looked more stunning. Under soft amber lighting, the vaulted ceilings shimmered above a sea of linen-draped tables, lush green centerpieces, and display screens showcasing our portfolio impact. Community solar projects, female-led startups, refugee-owned bakeries we'd helped fund. This was the world we'd built. Equal parts beautiful and deliberate. Julian adjusted his cufflinks. Nervous. I took a breath. No, I said. Not anymore. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about them. It was about stepping fully into the life I'd created, without apology, without permission. Guests began arriving in waves. Local politicians, sustainability influencers, industry leaders. We greeted them with practiced warmth, answered the same 5 questions a dozen times. How did you grow so quickly? What's next for Hart and Callahan? Will you expand nationally? Then I saw them. They entered as a unit, just like the old days. My mother in navy silk, face tight with performance. Lila beside her in a cream sheath dress, hair pinned immaculately, eyes scanning the room like it owed her something. and Daniel, slower, more careful, trailing just behind, the lines in his face deeper than I remembered. They didn't see me right away, which was perfect. I watched them make their way around the gallery space, Lila's practiced smile faltering as she failed to find familiar faces. Daniel looked smaller than I remembered. My mother smiled tightly at the curated displays, clearly trying to decide if this event exceeded or fell short of her expectations. Let them wonder. Julian and I remained by the entrance, chatting with the mayor about sustainable city development. It wasn't until my mother turned toward us that recognition finally hit her. She stopped mid-sentence, her smile freezing like a glitch in motion. "Nina," she gasped, stepping forward. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer a hug. I extended my hand, politely. "Mother, I'm glad you could make it." She recovered quickly, air-kissing the space beside my cheek. "You look radiant." Julian stepped forward. Julian Hart, co-founder and CEO. My mother's smile twitched. "Ah, yes, the husband." "Yes," Julian replied smoothly, "and partner in every sense." Lila extended her hand next. "You've done well for yourself." "Thanks," I replied evenly. "We've done well together." She blinked, as if realizing the wording wasn't an accident. Daniel offered a half nod. "Nina." I returned the gesture with practiced calm. "Daniel." Julian's tone shifted slightly. "We're happy to welcome Meridian to the Hart and Callahan family." Daniel paled. Lila's eyes narrowed. "Oh," she said, "you're the parent company." "Yes," I said quietly. "We closed the deal last month." I saw it register, the new hierarchy, the silent shift in status. Daniel's role, now, sat under a brand with my name on the door. "Please," Julian said, gesturing toward the atrium, "enjoy the evening. Dinner will be served shortly." We moved away, but I could feel their eyes burning through my back the entire time. During dinner, I gave a short welcome speech. I thanked our team, our clients, and the communities that had trusted us. I ended with a note about sustainable legacies. How true success comes not from chasing the loudest victories, but from building quietly and purposefully, one choice at a time. Julian followed with the announcement about Meridian's integration. Cameras flashed. Applause echoed. Daniel's name was mentioned once in passing as part of the compliance team. When we sat back down, my hands were steady. Later, at the dessert table, my mother approached again. "I always knew you'd do something big," she said, as if rewriting history mid-sentence. "Did you?" She tilted her head. "You always had potential. You just needed direction." "No," I said calmly. "I needed belief. You gave that to Lila. I gave it to myself." She sipped her champagne. "Lila and Daniel are going through a rough time. Maybe you could speak to Julian about—" "No," I said softly. Her eyes narrowed. "You would deny your own family support?" "I didn't say that," I said. "I'm no longer the person who lets guilt override boundaries." She didn't speak again. A while later, Lila found me near the courtyard doors. "Your husband is—" "Impressive," she said flatly. I smiled. "Yes, he is. He speaks about you like you run the company." "I do." There was a pause. "You know," she added with brittle poise, "we were happy for a while." "I believe that," I said gently. "But happiness built on someone else's pain never lasts." She blinked, maybe from the truth, maybe from surprise. "You always wanted to be seen as stronger, Lila," I continued. "But the truth is, I didn't need to steal someone else's story to write mine." She walked away without another word. As the evening wound down and the lights dimmed to a golden hush, Julian slipped his hand into mine. "How do you feel?" he asked. I exhaled. "Lighter," I said, like I finally put something down that I didn't realize I was still carrying. He nodded. "They seemed smaller than you remembered." I smiled faintly. "No, I just got bigger." The house was quiet when we got home. Julian loosened his tie and tossed his jacket onto the back of a chair. I kicked off my heels and padded into the kitchen, pulling the leftover chocolate mousse from the fridge. We ate it standing up, sharing the container with 2 spoons, leaning against the counter under warm pendant lights. "So," Julian said, watching me closely, "now that it's over, how do you really feel?" I paused, not triumphant, not angry, not even smug. "Free," I said, finally, like I finally stopped waiting for something I didn't realize I still wanted, an apology maybe, or recognition, or just for them to say I mattered. I set down my spoon, but tonight I realized I don't need it anymore. I don't need anything from them. Julian smiled softly. That's what healing looks like. I looked at him, at this man who had stood beside me through every fragile beginning, every unsure step. He never needed me to be perfect. He never compared. He just chose me, over and over. And I realized something. If Lila had never taken Daniel, if my mother had never pushed me aside, if I had been the daughter she praised, the girlfriend he married, I might never have left. I might have stayed in that suffocating town, working a small gallery job, trying to please a family who only loved me when I fit their mold. I might have spent a lifetime shrinking myself into someone they could accept. But they betrayed me, and in doing so, they set me free. I looked around the kitchen, our kitchen. It wasn't grand. It wasn't a palace, but every inch of it had been earned. Every light fixture, every coffee stain on the countertop, every framed print from my old art school days, it was all real. It was all mine. Do you think they regret it? I asked softly. Julian didn't answer right away. I think, he said eventually, they regret who you became without them. Not because they miss you, but because they can't claim credit. That landed deeper than I expected. Because he was right. They didn't want my happiness. They wanted control over it. And when they lost that, they lost their grip on me entirely. I took his hand. Thank you, I said, for never making me feel like I had to prove I was worthy. You never had to, he said simply. I saw you from the beginning. I rested my head on his shoulder. In the silence, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stood outside that kitchen door, listening to her mother rewrite her future in real time. She would have cried. She would have begged. She would have tried to hold on, but I had let her go long ago. And now, standing in the home I built with the man who chose me for everything I am, not despite my softness, but because of it, I knew the most powerful thing I'd ever done wasn't leaving them behind. It was not becoming like them, because I could have retaliated. I could have flaunted my success. I could have crushed them with status and title, and look at me now. But instead, I stood there, calm, gracious whole. And when they looked at me, they didn't see revenge. They saw a life that no longer needed them. And that was the loudest silence I could ever give them. I squeezed Julian's hand. Let's go to bed. He smiled. Long day of empire building tomorrow? No, I said. Long day of painting. He blinked. You're painting again. I nodded. Started last week. Nothing big. Just something for the hallway. Will I get to see it? Eventually. And I meant it. Because I was no longer trying to prove myself. Not to anyone. I was simply creating again. Out of joy, not pain. That night, as I climbed into bed beside the man I chose and who chose me back, I realized I had finally reclaimed everything they tried to take, my voice, my peace, my power, and above all, myself. The notification came at 2:47 a.m., slicing through the silence of our bedroom with a cold, sterile light. My phone screen lit up in the dark, and before I even reached for it, I already knew. There was a familiar rhythm to betrayal, a pattern my gut had started to recognize before my mind dared to name it. Nathan, my husband of 15 years, was supposed to be in Boston, attending a medical conference on neurosurgical innovations. His itinerary had been shared dutifully on our joint calendar, complete with hotel booking numbers and lecture schedules. I'd kissed him goodbye at the airport just 2 days ago, watched him disappear through security with his laptop bag and navy overcoat. And yet here it was, an alert from our shared credit card. $1,489. First-class international flights. 2 passengers. I stared at the digits until they blurred. My breathing was steady, my fingers cold. Lying in the king-size bed Nathan insisted we import from Italy, under Egyptian cotton sheets he'd claimed were worth every dollar for spinal support. I suddenly felt like I was drowning in someone else's life. His life. Nathan had always curated everything around us as if our home were a portfolio. The hardwood floors flown in from a little town outside Florence. The smart lighting system that changed hues depending on the time of day. The artwork, always minimalist, always expensive. He called it a reflection of success. I called it a showroom. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb the silence. The hardwood felt cool against my bare feet as I moved down the hall, past the hallway gallery of Nathan's diplomas, framed in custom walnut. His home office smelled faintly of leather and antiseptic. I sat down in his ergonomic chair, the one he swore helped with lumbar fatigue. The screen flickered awake at a tap. I didn't need to think twice about his password. Our wedding date, followed by his mother's maiden name. Predictable. Secure. Only if you didn't know the man behind the mask. His inbox open like a wound. It was all there. Flights to Malé, confirmation for a beachfront villa in the Maldives, itinerary notes for couples massages and sunset cruises. My gaze landed on the name Lexi Monroe. I didn't recognize it at first, but the picture attached to a hotel reservation made it clear. Blonde. Tall. 20-something. Probably the pharmaceutical sales rep from that conference last spring. The one who kept calling at odd hours and sending overly friendly emails with winking emojis. I sat back in his chair and let the weight of it settle. I should have felt something explosive. Rage, despair, the kind of betrayal that makes you scream into a pillow. But I didn't. Instead, I felt clarity. Cold, precise clarity. This wasn't a detonation. It was diagnosis. I had seen the symptoms for months. The new cologne he claimed a patient had gifted him, the evening jogs that stretched until midnight, the sudden gym membership, the interest in cooking light Mediterranean meals and going gluten-free. He'd been preparing for his escape the way a surgeon prepares for a major procedure. Quietly, meticulously, assuming no one else in the room was paying attention. He thought I was asleep all this time, that I was busy arranging dinner parties, booking spa appointments, keeping the house pretty. He had no idea I was watching, learning, preparing. 15 years married to a neurosurgeon had taught me more than how to host fundraisers or talk to hospital board members. It had taught me to pay attention to details. And tonight, every detail was screaming. I opened a new tab and logged into our joint investment account. Then our real estate portfolio. Then the crypto wallets he didn't think I knew about. The balances glowed against the screen like beacons in the dark. He'd built an empire with precision. What he didn't realize is, so had I. Only mine wasn't made of Italian floors and designer furniture. Mine was built on quiet observation, on knowing where the bodies were buried. He thought the danger was in the scalpel he held in the oar. He'd forgotten the most dangerous weapon is the one you never see coming. And I was done pretending to be invisible. I didn't rush. That was Nathan's mistake. He always rushed the parts he didn't think mattered. Small talk, foreplay, the little rituals of marriage. He underestimated the power of the quiet space between words. I never did. The light from the monitor bathed the room in sterile blue as I opened his folders, each one labeled with the same kind of smug precision he used in surgery. Travel receipts, consulting expenses, personal wellness. It was all there, camouflaged in professional jargon, tucked beneath PDFs and booking confirmations. His love letters to Lexi weren't written in poetry. They were typed itineraries and forwarded spa brochures. A week in the Maldives, 5-star resort, private infinity pool. Her name appeared on everything. Lexi Monroe. 26. Ambitious. Probably thinks seducing a doctor means skipping the line to her own empire. I clicked open one of her emails, subject line, Maldives plan, and scrolled past the nauseating string of emojis. Her tone was syrupy but calculated. She wasn't in love. She was investing. But then again, so was he. Nathan's entire life was a series of carefully placed bets: his education, his marriage, his career. He'd married me when I was fresh out of law school. Just past the bar, still idealistic enough to believe in love without prenups. I need someone grounded, he'd said. You're so calm, Evelyn. You make everything feel safe. Translation: I was quiet. I didn't make a mess. I stayed out of the spotlight, let him shine. And for a while I convinced myself that was love. That love meant folding into his world like soft linen, ironing his shirts while ignoring the itch in my own skin. I traded my courtroom heels for Louboutin dinner pumps, my legal briefs for charity brunch menus. Everyone saw me as the doting wife. Even Nathan forgot there was more to me than place settings and polite applause. But I hadn't forgotten, and now neither would he. I minimized the email and opened our family financial dashboard. He didn't think I understood numbers, not really. He'd spent years smiling tolerantly whenever I asked about offshore funds or the quarterly reports from our rental properties. You don't have to worry about all that, he'd say, like a father patting a child on the head. I've got it under control. He did, but so did I, because while Nathan was building his kingdom, I was mapping it. Every LLC filed in his name, I had the EINs memorized. The shell company in Nevada used to move money. Quietly, I helped him set it up, under the guise of being his signing witness. Every exotic investment, every networking trip to conferences that just happened to be held at luxury resorts, I logged them all one by one. He thought he was playing chess while I was arranging flowers. What he didn't know was I'd been playing a different game entirely. I pulled out the manila folder I'd stashed in the drawer of my vanity table 6 months ago. Inside was my copy of the power of attorney he'd signed before his spinal procedure last year. Just in case something happens, he'd mumbled, still groggy from pre-op sedatives. He'd never even read it, but I had, and it was still valid. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering above the keyboard, pulse steady. This wasn't vengeance. Not yet. This was reconnaissance. And just like in law school, the first rule of strategy was simple. Know your opponent better than they know themselves. I clicked into the real estate files. 3 properties in San Diego, 1 in Palm Springs, the vacation house in Napa, all registered under Carter Holdings, LLC. I noted the addresses, the deed numbers. Next tab, vehicles. 1 Mercedes, 1 Tesla, and his precious vintage Aston Martin, a statement piece he bought last year after turning 50. Next, his watch collection, stored in a climate-controlled vault. Estimated value? Just over $350,000. He'd called them investments. He was about to learn just how liquid those investments could be. The house was still quiet. The air had that early morning hush, like the city hadn't woken up enough to judge me yet. I reached for my phone, scrolled through contacts, and tapped the name that hadn't been used in years. Edward Langston, family attorney. The phone rang twice before he answered, voice groggy. Evelyn. I smiled just slightly. Hi, Edward. I need to talk business. Edward met me at his office, just after 8. He hadn't even changed out of his jogging suit. But the moment he saw the look in my eyes, he knew this wasn't a social call. We didn't waste time with pleasantries. I handed him the power of attorney and a typed summary I'd compiled between 3 and 6 am. Every asset, every account, every line item Nathan had ever tried to keep under wraps. Edward whistled softly as he flipped through the pages. You've been thorough. 15 years of practice, I said. I want everything transferred. Everything he owns. Frozen. Sold. Secured. I want him to come back and find a ghost town. Edward raised an eyebrow. You're not planning to tell him first? I looked at him level. He's in the Maldives with another woman, using our money. No, Edward, I'm not giving him a warning. I'm giving him a reckoning. By mid-morning, I was standing in the vault of Carter House Auction and Private Collections. One of Nathan's old friends had once joked that the only thing he valued more than his practice was his vintage watch collection. He wasn't wrong. Each piece rested in its custom-cut display case like a crown jewel. He had names for them. Stories. A Rolex Daytona, once owned by a Formula One driver. A Patek Philippe he claimed was a better investment than gold. A custom Painrai, engraved with the words "Time is power." I ran my finger over the glass and smiled. Let's see how powerful time feels when it's auctioned off in pieces. The auction house's appraiser, a sharply dressed woman named Alina, walked me through the estimates. "Your husband has a remarkable eye," she said, tapping notes into her tablet. "This is easily one of the most valuable private collections I've seen this year. And if you're looking to liquidate quickly, I already have discreet buyers in mind." "Discreet is exactly what I need," I said, "and fast. I'll leave the coordination to you." By noon, I was back at the house where a moving company was boxing up Nathan's office. I'd told them it was a last-minute redesign. They didn't ask questions. The only thing left untouched was his degrees, still lying neatly on the wall, bearing seals from Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Stanford. He'd always said those papers were what made people trust him, but now they just looked like artifacts from a story no longer true. Upstairs, Lily had set up her laptop at the dining table, sipping iced coffee like she was casually checking email. But the speed at which her fingers danced across the keys said otherwise. "Found 3 more offshore accounts," she said, not looking up, "all disguised as medical research grants. You want me to pull everything?" "Yes. And copy every file to a secure drive. Timestamp everything." "You know this could take him down completely, right?" she asked. "Like federal prison levels of trouble." "That's the point," I replied. She nodded once. "Then let's perform open-heart surgery." By late afternoon, I was back in Monica's office. She looked up from her desk, smiled without amusement, and said, "I spoke to a judge friend of mine. We can file everything while Nathan's in the air. The minute he lands, he'll be served. It's technically petty, but legally flawless." "It's not petty," I said. "It's poetic." Monica tapped a folder. "Also, we need to prepare for blowback. Nathan's not just a cheating husband. He's a public figure. There will be press. There will be lawyers. I'm ready for them all. And the house. Everything he claimed as an asset or legacy. It's going on the market. Watches, cars, vacation homes liquidated. I want his empire turned into nothing but receipts." "And your end game?" she asked, tilting her head. "I don't want revenge," I said, standing. "I want the truth exposed. And I want him to know it came from the woman he thought was too quiet to matter." I walked out as the sun began to dip behind the Pacific, casting long golden shadows across San Diego's glassy skyline. The day had been a scalpel in motion. Clean cuts. No hesitation. Tomorrow we'd begin the extraction. The next morning, I put on a blazer I hadn't worn in years. Slate, gray, sharp-shouldered, tailored back when I still appeared in courtrooms and conference halls. As I looked in the mirror, I didn't see Nathan's wife anymore. I saw the woman I used to be, and I saw what she had become. Monica met me at the doors of her downtown office building. She didn't hug me. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She simply handed me a black leather folder and said, "Let's take him apart." In her conference room, 3 more women were waiting. Her associate Daria, a litigation expert, her paralegal Anna, with files already color-coded, and someone I hadn't expected, Agent Rivera, FBI Financial Crimes Division. "We've been tracking low-level flags around Carter's accounts for about a year now," Rivera said, flipping through a federal binder. "Your intel accelerates everything. Offshore routing through Hong Kong, unregistered investment firms, funds masked as medical research. It's all textbook laundering behavior. And now? I asked. Now, she said, we follow the money and lock every door behind him. Katie, my niece, Lily's real name, arrived 15 minutes later with her laptop, a pair of oversized headphones, and an expression of focused war. She plugged into Monica's secure server and began decrypting the files she'd mirrored from Nathan's cloud accounts. You're going to want to see this, she said, dragging a set of folders onto the big screen. Inside were scanned construction permits, architectural plans, and business license applications, all registered in Nathan's name through shell corporations in Malaysia. The project, a private aesthetic surgery facility for ultra-wealthy clients. High profit, low regulation. The kind of clinic where discretion came standard and medical ethics got fuzzy. He's been planning this for over a year, Katie said. Hiring a shadow staff, buying equipment under company aliases, even drawing up client acquisition strategies. It's not just a clinic. It's an exit strategy. Rivera leaned forward. He wasn't planning a vacation. He was planning a vanishing act. Monica's tone sharpened. This qualifies for federal fraud, conspiracy, and potentially international tax evasion. Katie clicked into another encrypted folder. And here's where it gets dirtier. She pulled up emails between Nathan and an offshore law firm discussing relocation options, countries without extradition treaties, and a resignation draft from his medical board, dated 3 weeks from now. His plan was to disappear, I said quietly. Abandon his practice, his partners, me. Take Lexi and vanish before anyone could catch him. Monica turned to Rivera. Can we freeze everything now? With Evelyn's power of attorney and your documentation? Yes. We'll move on it immediately. I watched as they coordinated, Monica dispatching legal alerts, Rivera making encrypted calls to federal liaisons. It was like watching a control room go live in the middle of a crisis. No, not a crisis. A counterstrike. By early afternoon, I was standing with a representative from the real estate division of a luxury auction firm, reviewing appraisals for our vacation homes. The agent smiled politely as she explained the high interest in the Napa property. It's not just the house, she said. It's the story. A respected surgeon's private retreat, now up for sale under mysterious circumstances? That kind of narrative adds zeros. I nodded. List everything. No delays. Meanwhile, Katie and Monica's team were building the financial timeline. The pattern was undeniable. Money siphoned from joint ventures, concealed through layered transfers, and funneled toward one destination. Nathan's future life without me. But he'd miscalculated. He'd forgotten I had a past without him, and that I'd brought it back with teeth. By sunset, we had everything we needed. The trigger was set, the filings prepared, bank accounts frozen, asset sales initiated. And Nathan, he was still in paradise, clinking champagne glasses with a woman who didn't know the sky was about to fall. I stared at the security footage of our empty house, now echoing with the quiet work of moving crews and appraisers. I imagined Nathan opening his phone, checking his balance, finding nothing. This wasn't revenge. It was surgery, and I was almost ready to close. The next morning, I walked into the Carter Neurological Institute, not as a supportive wife bringing lunch or signing donor checks. I walked in with a locked briefcase, a team of lawyers, and the weight of truth heavy in my hands. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. Mrs. Carter? Is everything okay? I smiled politely. We need the main conference room, and I'll need all 4 partners present. They were already arriving one by one. Dr. Reynolds, Nathan's closest friend since residency, calm, grandfatherly, always wearing a bow tie. Dr. Chin, meticulous and quiet, in charge of billing and operations. Dr. Patel, young and idealistic, often seen as Nathan's protege. And finally, Dr. Thompson, the Institute's managing partner and voice of reason. Monica followed behind me, already laying out packets. Agent Rivera waited near the back, plain clothes, her badge just barely visible. Katie had set up the projector, and the screen glowed with the title. Internal audit presentation, restricted access. The room fell silent. I looked each of them in the eye before speaking. I know this is unexpected, but what we're about to show you affects every single one of you. Every staff member, every patient, every dollar that's moved through this practice in the last 3 years. They nodded, though confusion clouded their faces. Then Monica stepped forward and began. She didn't dramatize. She didn't editorialize. She presented the evidence like a scalpel to the chest. Precise, unavoidable, fatal. Emails from Nathan authorizing wire transfers under false vendor names. Patient invoices with inflated surgical fees. Medical equipment purchases that never arrived. Funds redirected to shell accounts. A pension fund that had been dipped into repeatedly. Travel reimbursements for trips that didn't exist. Dr. Reynolds removed his glasses and rubbed his face. All these years, he whispered. We trusted him. He was our friend. Dr. Chin was pale. The pension fund. My retirement. We're working to recover everything, Monica assured them. But you need to move now. Access has to be restricted. All systems changed. We believe Dr. Carter was preparing to resign and disappear. His departure would have left you with a collapsed practice and legal liability. Dr. Patel looked devastated. He mentored me. I thought he played all of you, I said, my voice low but steady. He used your trust as his cover, just like he used mine. Agent Rivera stepped forward. With your permission, we'll coordinate with the hospital board. We need to flag every patient record, every billing pattern. There are signs this extends beyond financial fraud, insurance manipulation, unnecessary procedures, possibly even medical ethics violations. Dr. Thompson, stoic until now, finally spoke. Do whatever you need to do. Lock it down. Protect the patients. And make sure he never steps foot in this building again. As Monica distributed emergency legal orders and Rivera called in the forensic accountants, I sat at the corner of the table, silent, watching the cracks form in the walls of Nathan's empire. No raised voices, no hysteria, just the cold efficiency of an institution performing emergency surgery on itself, cutting out its own rot. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. Just met someone interesting at breakfast. Investor for the clinic. Wish you were here to help charm him. I stared at it for a moment, then turned my gaze to the security feed on my phone. Another moving truck had arrived at the house. The wine cellar inventory was nearly complete. The furniture appraisers were finishing the second floor. I whispered, "Oh, I'm being charming, Nathan. Just not in the way you expected." Across the table, the forensic team spread out folders like crime scene photos. Every account, every shell company, every name. Katie pulled up Lexi's alternate social media profiles on the projection screen. "Look at this," she said. "Seminar in Singapore. Property investment workshop." She was scouting assets months ago. This wasn't romance. This was strategy. Agent Rivera's voice dropped. He was planning to flee. She's part of it. But now, their accounts are frozen, and they're trapped on a tourist island with nowhere to run. The partners looked shaken, but I wasn't there to soothe them. I was there to make sure the blade went all the way through. Nathan had spent years crafting a perfect reputation. Doctor, mentor, visionary. He thought it would protect him. He never considered it could be used to bury him. And I wasn't done yet. Nathan didn't notice it at first. That's the thing about people like him. When they feel invincible, they don't check for cracks in the floor. The first sign came as he and Lexi finished their breakfast on the balcony of the overwater villa. Papaya juice, hand-delivered by a staff member who bowed too quickly. Nathan reached for his phone, intending to check on a stock transfer he'd scheduled the day before. The app crashed, then reopened with a red warning. Account access denied. Please contact your financial institution. He tried another account. Same result. He switched to a third, his personal offshore reserve in the Cayman Islands. Nothing. The screen simply refreshed and kicked him out. Lexi frowned. Everything okay? Nathan forced a smile. Wi-Fi must be spotty. Back in San Diego, I sat in Monica's office, sipping coffee as Katie's alerts lit up her monitor like a battlefield radar. Attempted login to Hong Kong account blocked. Second attempt through proxy server in Indonesia, also blocked, she reported almost casually. Monica grinned. Let's see how long before he panics. A minute later, Katie's laptop pinged again. He's trying to access the smart home system, probably checking the cameras. Shut it down, I said. He doesn't get to watch. She nodded. Done. His access is revoked. Systems locked from all external signals. Agent Rivera stepped into the room, holding a printed update. Interpol has eyes on them. They're still in the villa, no attempts to leave yet. But Lexi just booked a private charter from Malé to a small airport in Cambodia. We've alerted local authorities. They're trying to run, Monica said. No, I corrected. They're realizing there's nowhere to run. That afternoon, Monica's phone buzzed with a media alert. A national outlet was preparing a story, the surgeon's double life, fraud, affairs, and a missing fortune. They'd already interviewed former patients, medical board officials, even a few anonymous staff from the Carter Institute. Jessica, from Monica's PR team, stepped in. We've coordinated with the FBI to ensure the facts are airtight. Every outlet will report the same version. No rumors, no distractions, just the truth. More alerts came in like artillery fire. Singapore froze 3 bank accounts linked to Nathan. Total, $12 million. Katie intercepted an encrypted message from Lexi. Plan B is ready. Waiting for confirmation. Send coordinates. Agent Rivera read it aloud. Plan B. Track it, she ordered, and get me everything on it. In the secure command room at the FBI's satellite office, a team of forensic accountants worked like surgeons dissecting a corpse. Charts and timelines covered every wall. Screens showed account trails from New York to Dubai, from Zurich to Malaysia. Marcus wasn't just funding a clinic, one of them muttered. He was orchestrating a multinational fraud ring. Which means, Agent Rivera said slowly, we're not just looking at embezzlement. We're looking at racketeering. Outside Monica's window, another moving truck pulled away from my house. This one loaded with Nathan's rare book collection. Every volume cataloged, appraised, and heading for auction. A text came through on my phone. From Nathan. Claire, something's terribly wrong. All our accounts are locked. I can't reach the bank. My cards keep getting declined. Please call me. I didn't reply. Seconds later, another message. Why can't I access the house? What's going on? Did you do something? Still, I said nothing. Some silences are louder than screams. In the background, Linda, head nurse from the Institute, handed Rivera a new set of documents retrieved from Nathan's personal storage unit. Correspondence, off-the-record payment logs, detailed records of side deals with pharmaceutical reps. He kept everything, Linda said bitterly, like trophies. Katie pointed to the screen. Lexi's boarding. She's carrying a new briefcase. It wasn't part of her luggage when they arrived. Probably cash and bearer bonds, Rivera said. Harder to trace, but not impossible. At that moment, Monica's assistant stepped in, breathless. His parents just arrived. I turned, surprised. Richard and Margaret? They're in the lobby, asking for you. I walked out to find them standing together, both looking decades older than I remembered. Margaret's once perfect hair was limp and loose. Richard, the retired judge, had lost the sharpness in his eyes. Margaret held up a folder. We found these in our vacation house. He left them there last month. Inside were handwritten notebooks, investment strategies, offshore contacts, timelines. the evidence of premeditation. Richard's voice was grave. You have everything you need, Evelyn. No mercy. I nodded, because mercy was never part of the plan. The extradition hearing took place via secure video conference. On the screen, Nathan appeared in a wrinkled beige prison jumpsuit, his once slick hair now hanging limp over hollow eyes. His jaw twitched, his posture sagged. He looked nothing like the man who had stood on gala stages, who had grinned for magazine spreads beside medical breakthroughs and ribbon cuttings. He tried to speak. His lawyer cut in first, citing mental health concerns after what he called a psychological break and a suicide attempt in holding. The federal prosecutor didn't even blink. Your Honor, she said, her voice flat but lethal. Carter's mental state did not prevent him from orchestrating a multi-country fraud scheme, constructing shell corporations, laundering over $20 million, and coordinating a planned disappearance. It should not protect him from justice now. The judge agreed. Within hours, Nathan was on U.S. soil. I didn't attend the arraignment. There was no need. I watched from Monica's office as live updates scrolled across my screen. Nathan charged with 32 counts, including wire fraud, racketeering, tax evasion, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit international financial crimes. Later, a reporter described him as a man unraveling in real time. He wasn't wrong. The Carter Neurological Institute dissolved its partnership with him in less than a week. Every patient he'd ever treated was notified. Insurance companies began audits. Ethics boards launched formal investigations. Medical journals withdrew his papers. One former colleague tweeted, "We thought he was a genius. Turns out he was just good at hiding." The story exploded. Dr. Fraud trended for 4 days straight. Podcasts picked it up. True crime shows scrambled to secure interviews. A documentary offer came in from a major streaming platform. Monica fielded them all. We declined every single one, because this wasn't for entertainment. This was a reckoning. I wasn't done yet. Inside the courtroom, Nathan's parents sat quietly in the back row. Margaret clutched a handkerchief. Richard didn't blink once through the entire hearing. The prosecution laid everything bare. Offshore accounts, forged medical equipment invoices, unauthorized procedures billed at triple rates. And then the part that stunned even seasoned jurors. Evidence of unnecessary surgeries, cosmetic adjustments pushed on patients who didn't ask for them, just to pad profits. Women, teenagers, vulnerable people. Nathan's defense team offered a plea deal. Reduced sentence. Limited restitution. Gag order. Monica didn't flinch. We reject it in full. The trial moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. When the verdict came, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Guilty on all counts. The judge's voice rang clear. This court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison. You are to make full restitution to your victims. Your medical license is permanently revoked in all jurisdictions. Nathan swayed slightly. For a moment, I thought he might collapse. But he didn't. He stood there, held up by nothing but his own ego, watching everything fall. As he was led away, he turned to me, face hollow, voice barely a whisper. Evelyn, please. We can fix this. I just need a chance to explain. I didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted my name. I kept walking. Back at the house, now stripped of art, furniture, and memory, I stood by the window, watching the final moving truck pull away. It was empty now, not just of possessions, but of weight. I had no interest in rebuilding the life Nathan destroyed. I wasn't here to salvage his name or start over. I was here to finish it, cleanly, completely. Weeks later, I sat on a quiet patio at a small legal nonprofit, reviewing applications for women seeking financial protection from controlling spouses. One of the new volunteers brought me tea and asked why I was smiling. I looked down at the file in my lap. No reason, I said, but I knew the reason. It was the first time in 15 years I could breathe without permission. They say revenge is bitter, that it corrodes the soul and leaves nothing but ash behind. But standing there, watching his empire crumble, I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel triumphant either. I felt clean, like someone finally waking up from anesthesia and remembering who she used to be. For 15 years, I wore silence like armor, smiled when I wanted to scream, shrunk so he could shine. I let the world believe I was just a beautiful wife, a gracious hostess, a shadow in someone else's legacy. But shadows remember. We remember what was said when no one else was listening. We remember the patterns, the lies, the weight of every moment we were told to sit down and be grateful. And sometimes we take notes. He thought I would never leave. He thought I couldn't survive without him. He was wrong. I didn't just survive. I watched him burn, slowly, legally, methodically, and I never once looked away. Not because I needed him to suffer, but because I needed to prove to myself that I was never the weak one. I was just quiet, and sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one writing the ending.